Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Nowadays, the whole world is watching with bated breath the continuing war between Russia and Ukraine. And Ukraine is being supported by practically every country in the West, led by USA, of course. Russia and USA are traditional enemies. Even when they were allies in the Second World War, there was no love lost between them. And if you look at the voting which took place in UN General Assembly or its constitution, you will find that the majority of the countries are supporting West. And China is a traditional friend of Russia. Its geographical contiguous, and the ideology is the same, communism. It has been supported. But the question being raised all over is, would it remain supportive or would it become from semi-neutral to, from supportive to semi-neutral and then to semi-neutral? Possibilities are there. It's every possibility of China, which is warm to Russia, but it has global ambitions. One thing which restricts China is that Taiwan issue. If ever China tries to take over Taiwan by force, US is going to come with full force. And at that time, China would be needing the help of Russia. So it doesn't want to annoy the big brother. And looking at the whole thing, China is a very pragmatic country, and it can sacrifice its relations if it's beneficial for it. You remember 1962, it used to be an era of Hindi, Chini, Bhai, Bhai, Indians and Chinese are brothers. And then all of a sudden, there was huge attack. India was of course defeated badly. And Russia at that time had made a statement, yes, India is our friend, but China is a brother. So that fraternal ties are there. Nevertheless, what is Beijing going to do? It's not looking at the current conflict between Russia and US in the military terms. No, this is something to be seen. China is not looking at the war or the relationship between Russia and US in terms of winning or defeating. It is assessing, in fact, very shrewdly, very sensibly, the Western capacity to wage a financial war and to build a firewall of its own economy if the same weapon was wielded against him, for example, in Taiwan, as I said, or in Philippines, South China, anything. So would it be able to withstand the financial war, the sanctions, and anything else? The conflict in Ukraine could see China and USA arrived in the same mold at one time or the other. But what would happen in that? Would China do it? Now, what I feel is there's possibility, and also it's quite a probability that US and China may arrive at a new modus vivendi, a new working system aimed at anchoring the world economy even as the tension-filled relationship continues. There's a curious love-hate relationship between China and USA. China was instrumental in US defeat in Vietnam and in Korea. You don't forget it. And USA is still supportive of Taiwan, Philippines, and other countries in the littoral states in the Pacific. So that tension-filled relationship, and Beijing is steaming ahead with the objective of establishing a solid presence in the Indian Ocean. So Recently, I had a talk with Vijay Gokhale, who is the former Foreign Secretary of India and was an ambassador to China. And he agreed with me that China is really assessing the financial implications and at the same time is looking for another thing. It's looking for more acceptability and partnership in a new world that might emerge after the war is over. That thing is definite that the geopolitical relationship is going to be reset. And how would China like to maneuver and ultimately dominate the world order? The Western and the American sanctions of Russia, the speed with which they were imposed, the spread of the sanctions, and also whether these are going to be applied, and what's the impact going to be in Russia, actually will serve a movement what the psychologists say aha moment. And that is the central focus of all studying China today. China would also be concerned about the political future of Putin. And in short and medium term, is the stability of the Russian government. Because Putin's continuous in office is critical to China's security. If Putin goes and anti-Putin faction comes in power, China's security may also be threatened. In case, and this is a remote possibility, but it's there, if for whatever reason there's a change in the government, because US is trying to unseat and throw out Putin, there's a change in the government, any change that comes to power in Russia will be less accommodating, and China would be less secure. So Beijing is most likely thinking of trying a policy, crafting a policy that would allow it to play a role in the resolution of crisis to ensure that that role is acceptable to the world. So imagine the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Foreign Minister of China Wang Yi have spoken twice in the last 3 weeks. Actually, spoken 3 times. And that suggests to me that's not beyond the realm of probability that both are discussing ways and means of bringing the crisis to some sort of a resolution. Although each has taken, of course, a position. That is for the public consumption. But behind the scene activity cannot be ignored. At a press conference in Beijing recently held, Wang battled down a question about the health of the Russian-Chinese friendship. And he said, China and Russia are determined that our relationship is free from all interference and discord. And Wang's speech earlier on the 15th anniversary of the historic US-China Shanghai Communique marked the normalization of the two countries when Nixon went there in 1972. He, in fact, signaled Beijing's acknowledgement that despite this tension-filled rivalry between USA and China, China still would need to remain engaged with USA. And so this is the need-based politics. And Chinese are extremely pragmatic. That speech was 4 days after the Russian invasion began. The challenge to China is how to hold firm on the partnership with Russia without there being collateral damage in relationship with USA. China recognizes that in the world of today, whatever we may say, USA still has the greatest power. It's a giant, it's a colossus. It would fall. Everybody knows it. The downfall is near, but still there. And the objective of that speech of Wang Yi was to flag areas of commonality that would allow US and China to maintain the relationship on an even keel. China doesn't want to become a collateral damage. And that is important. And he also made an observation that one sentence that actually left out of the context was Chinese foreign minister acknowledging that China is willing to consider coordinating with President Biden Build Back Better initiative to provide quality public goods to the country, and it's in line with BRI, the Border Road Initiative of China, and Biden's Build Back Better initiative. They have something in common, and China wants to benefit from them. And this is perhaps for the first time at a leadership level that China is signaling its willingness to dovetail BRI with the specific infrastructure initiatives of USA. Now, look, China's BRI would get definite a push if that connectivity can be there. And if you look at it, BRI has already done a sort of a joint venture, you can say, with the European Infrastructure Initiative. So BRI, EII, and Build Back Better of Biden, they have a certain congruity. So declining to be drawn into how Ukraine conflict might impact the troubled Indo-China relationship, especially the line of actual control, well, I can say it's too early to predict the impact of the conflict in Europe on the Indo-Pacific and the Quad. Let's not forget that in 2022 budget of China, there is defense budget is increased by 7.1%. And it's not a response to the current conflict in Ukraine, but consisting with its larger objective. Since 2013, if you look at the white papers published every 2 years, China has clearly declared its overseas interest. But then look at the modality. China says we have overseas interests, but what they are, they never define. And this undefined declaration that our overseas interest is intriguing. But then you can't ignore the fact that they have their first military base in Djibouti, and there is a report of possibly another Chinese logistic facility or base in Cambodia. So there is a larger objective to establish by the end of the decade a permanent or semi-permanent presence in the Indian Ocean. And that is something which Government of India has to look into. So pragmatism rules China. It has to weigh. If it sets up an offensive against, or starts an offensive against India in the Pacific Ocean or in the Indian Ocean, how would US respond? Would Quad remain a paper tiger, or would it become an actual participant and collaborator with India? In that case, China would definitely like to be on the right side of Russia. But then that's fraught with danger, because if it establishes a base in Indian Ocean, then you can be sure that somehow or the other it will maneuver to take over Taiwan. And that will bring definitely a very heavy-handed response from USA. So that issue, then the connectivity issue of BRI with the Biden's Build Back Better attitude, and that those initiatives, economic issues and overseas interest, both economic and military. These are the various parameters that define Chinese interest. And China is a firm believer in two things. Nothing is permanent. Things change. Yes, Russia is a brother. Russia is a friend. But we cannot annoy others I make others our enemies, so I will support Russia. But it will be moral support. And if it comes to the end, maybe we will send our army, maybe we'll give the arms, maybe we'll this. But then they are going to keep their channels open all the time. And if it comes really to the breaking point, they might tilt in favor of USA and the West because their larger economic interest and the political interest would be in that sector. That will give it more acceptability. And once it does that, the whole of the West would be willing to sacrifice India to quote China. Let's be very honest. So this is going to pose a problem for India as well. But as I said, China today is a Russian ally. But the possibility and probability of its working with the West can never be discounted. And we have got to remain very clear that China would weigh military terms, political terms, economic terms, and then take a decision one way or the other. Thank you.